Yeah, well, thank you. Let me know what questions you have.
Okay, so I can just go a bit in my background, tell you about it, just so you have a bit of a backdrop. So I have a meeting right after this with a potential supervisor. So I wanted to ask, like this, the timing actually was perfect. So I wanted to ask, how do you approach it? And how do I ask, like, if they're looking for like, if they're open for PhD students, and how open do I have to be? How direct I have to be, like culture wise? How do you think I should approach it?
That's a great question. And yeah, what great timing that this call is right before your other call. So it's a great question. And I think it is kind of like nerve-wracking sometimes because you don't really know what to expect walking into the call. And it almost feels like a mini interview in a way, but I want to reassure you that you shouldn't think of it that way. It really is just an informal kind of informational call. They're not going to be evaluating you. They're not going to be interviewing you. It should mostly feel pretty conversational. So I feel like a lot of the calls that I had with potential mentors, um, it started off with the usual, like, I mean, they're going to ask you for a brief summary of who you are. So that's probably the most interviewee it'll get. So make sure you're able to briefly describe like who you are, your background a little bit, and what your research interests are. And then then the conversation somehow would then naturally sort of, you know, transition to them talking about all of their research projects that match
Mhm.
sort of what you just described that you're interested in because they know you're reaching out because you want to apply to the PhD program and that they might be a potential mentor. And these people love talking about their research. So a bulk of the call will likely just be like them telling you about all the different opportunities that you have to be involved in their work and learning about that. And then you know, then it kind of becomes like a little bit of a back and forth. And you can say, oh yeah, like, everything that you mentioned that just mentioned, like I can see myself fitting in working on these projects with you. I have skills here, but I want to learn how to do this kind of methods or research.
Mhm.
So then you kind of like, so I would take a lot of notes, while they're talking, and then kind of
Mhm.
sort of summarize back, okay, what is it that really stood out to me that I can fit in with all the work that they're doing?
Mhm.
And then the conversation will kind of keep going like that. And then you'll reach a point where it'll be very obvious whether, the mentor is like accepting students, wanting to mentor more students, open to working with you. And then naturally the conversation will kind of go towards a yes, put me down on your application as a potential mentor that we talked, etc. And you know, I think you're gonna have a strong application, the conversation will go that way.
Mhm.
And then I would definitely, when they ask, like, what questions you might have, make sure you do have questions that you ask them. And it can be based on, all the research that they listed for you, but it can also be just like, what has your experience been like, mentoring other students in this PhD program? Are others,
Mhm.
what do other PhD programs say about, or other PhD students say about this program? Like, it's also your chance to get your mentors
Mhm.
insight onto the program itself, and they actually might tell you a lot more than what's kind of listed on the program website.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that is very useful. So I wanted to ask, and also I understood from talking to a lot of people that it also depends on the relationship you have because you're going to be working with them for potentially 5, 6 years. So it's like if there's like some kind of connection, not just research connection, but just connection like working connection, if you get what I mean. And I was wondering that like I'll figure that out kind of myself, or do I be like how do I like do I ask him like what your working style is, or like would I kind of know by the end of the call if he wants to work with me or doesn't?
So I think those are two questions of the like, what is your working style
Yeah.
versus like if they would be willing to take you on as a student. I think
Yeah.
asking someone what their working style is directly, it might be a lot for a first phone call.
Okay. Okay.
That's something that I would kind of because they might say something, but that might not actually be their,
Mhm.
working style. It's a kind of weird question.
Okay.
If anything, you can ask kind of like sort of similar questions without saying those
Mhm.
words, like, what kinds of research methods do you like to use? Like, can you tell me about like other students that you've trained in this PhD program? Like, what are they doing now? Like, how
Mhm.
they, kind of ask similar questions without directly
Okay.
saying that. And then to your question about the fit and whether they'll take you on, they will tell you outright, like, I don't have the capacity to take on a student right now. I'm not accepting anyone into my
Okay.
group for that. Like they'll tell you, likely the fact that they've gotten to this point where they've scheduled a call with you, it means that, they're taking time out of their schedule. So
Mm.
they're obviously interested, and I think that's a really good sign. They wouldn't have scheduled a call with you if they like really had no desire to take on any potential students. So
But in terms of going back to how you said asking similar questions, not directly, so when it comes to asking the question of like being his, like, should I be indirect with that as well, that question, or do you think he will take the lead himself
which question?
about like if he wants to take specifically working with me, not generally PhD students, but
Oh, yeah.
me?
I think by the end of the call, if it hasn't been obvious, I think you can ask, like, are you taking on additional students? Yes, no. If they say yes, like, then you say, I would love to work with you. Can I put you down on my
Mm,
application as a potential mentor?
okay.
But usually that will come up without you having to say that first. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And moving on to like the statement, personal statement and state of purpose, I was wondering if you look at if you have the capacity to review um, people's personal statements, and if you do that.
Yeah, I do review people's personal statements at no cost. So feel free to send that over if you're interested, and we can go from there.
Amazing, perfect, thanks. And I wanted to ask in terms of research experience, I saw one of your other videos and you mentioned that you don't need a lot of research experience, you just need to mention. But I have, like, I just did a master's degree and I don't have either full-time work experience or research experience. Like, I have my master's thesis research experience, but I have a lot of volunteering. So would that affect my application, do you think, if I don't have like full-time work experience either?
Well, aren't you a research assistant currently? You just said.
Yeah, but it's not full-time or anything. It's completely part-time. It's just on a weekly basis.
That's okay. That still counts as research experience. And by volunteer, do you mean like volunteer research experience, or what do you mean by volunteer experience?
Yeah, so volunteer research experience one and volunteer in education.
Yeah, I would put that all on your CV. Like, everything counts. People aren't looking like, oh, was this full time? Was this paid? They want to know that you've done research and you've built the skills and gotten that
Mhm.
experience. And sometimes it is unpaid. And it's not like on your CV you list paid versus unpaid. Like that's
Yeah.
there. So I would just put everything on your CV.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I was just looking at like the age group of people who are in that program and it seemed like they're much older. So that's why I was wondering, do they prefer people who are already in the industry and have been teachers or something?
They might, but that's not something you can control, unless you
Yeah,
want to like hold off and like, go do a mini different career and then come back and apply. So,
yeah,
I would just showcase the best version of yourself, and that's the best that you can do. You can't control like if they are looking for 5+ years of work experience in a school, that's not something. But I
yeah,
don't think usually PhD programs aren't like so rigid on like
yeah.
for example, my program, they say that they require a master's degree before applying, but there were still a handful of students who got admitted with no master's degrees. So, I think it just really depends. They look at your application holistically, and like if they really like one part of your application, but the other part maybe doesn't
Yeah.
have what they're looking for, it can kind of compensate. That's not a red flag to me. Like, I think that grades don't really matter that much in
Mm,
PhD applications for the most part. Uh,
mm,
they just want to make sure it's not like terribly low. Same with like
mm.
any standardized test scores. for the most part. I can't say that about everyone. But in
Yeah.
general, they care more about your personal statement, your experiences, what you've done.
And I wanted to say, I think these are my main questions. And just if you have any general advice on the personal statement, um, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I have videos on this. So if you haven't looked at my personal statement videos, those are on my YouTube channel. But my kind of key tips are like, one, you definitely want to open with some kind of a hook, like a personal
Mhm.
story, an anecdote, a quote, something that will grab the reader's attention and make you stand out. Um, but it's only the beginning. It's not like your whole, personal statement is going to be this creative story about yourself. It's a short hook
Yeah,
and then jump straight into detailing in depth your research skills, experience, and
yeah.
really then also talk about like why you want a PhD, why you want a PhD from that program, and like what
Mhm.
your career goals are, and then what your PhD is going, like why it's necessary to even get a PhD to do that. I would say that.
Okay.
And I would also talk about what you did in your master's because that's important stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't looked at your personal statement videos yet. But I think, wait, I just had a question in mind. It completely slipped my mind. Yeah, I just had when you were applying to, I think this question, when you were applying to PhD programs, what was your approach? Like, how many did you apply? Because, for example, the programs that I'm mostly interested, those universities are very competitive. And in like I want to say, you know how people say safe university? And I was wondering how you approached it. Did you apply to a lot of PhD? Because it obviously takes a lot of time and money. Or what's like the average people usually apply? Some students I heard like they only apply to two and some like 10. So I was wondering in your experience, what has most students' approach been?
So are you like dead set on staying in, like, are you geographically
Yeah.
yourself? Yeah, well, if you're open to broadening it to East Coast more generally, then I would definitely add a couple more schools on the list. So, first thing is there's no such thing as a safety school. I hate using that word because I think that PhD admissions are truly a numbers game, and even what
Yeah.
people might call a safety school might not take you. There's no such thing. You never know what the
Yeah.
program's looking for, and the spots are so limited. But at the same time, because of that same numbers game reasoning, I do believe that applying to more programs does increase your overall chances of getting in somewhere. And then
Mm,
also making sure that you have a nice spread so that, yes, it's not all extremely, competitive Ivy League schools and that you have
yeah.
like a nice array of different types of schools that have different
Yeah.
rankings in education. Um, and making sure that you have that nice spread. I would say in terms
Mm,
of numbers, um, I would say it really depends on like the person's situation. Like if someone really wants to stay in one city, then that really
mm,
limits the number that they apply and they're okay with that. Like, yeah, I'll just apply to these two programs in this one city because I don't want to move. Then that's their
yeah.
choice. But if you're a little bit flexible and can be mobile, I would recommend trying to apply to more programs. And then that number just depends on sort of, again, you're right, finances, because each school is another application fee. But in all honesty, the time that it takes to apply to an additional school, like the core part of your application is essentially going to be the same. It's really just
Yeah.
tweaking your personal statement and then making one or two more kind of like networking um, calls with faculty at that school. So that's the kind
Yeah.
of additional time that it will take, which in my opinion is like worth it to increase your chances. I think the finances part is kind of more case by case, and you should think about
Yeah.
that. Um, I applied to 10 programs. I was probably a little bit too many.
Okay.
I applied to a couple DRPH programs too because I just really didn't know like where my application would land. I only had 3 months of like true research experience. And I was in the boat of like, I just want to get in somewhere. I don't care where. because
Mm,
a PhD is still a PhD at the end of the day. So I applied to 10
yeah.
programs, and I'm here now. So
Okay, great.
yeah.
Yeah, that definitely gives me some kind of clarity. Because I wanted to make it a like a smart approach. I don't want to just apply randomly, without even connecting with professors or something, because yeah, that takes a little bit more time. But I think those were my main questions. I don't have any more. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course. Well, good luck. Best of luck with this application cycle. I hope the call with your potential mentor and future calls all go well. You're asking all the right questions. You're being very intentional. So I wish you the best and really hope for, a good outcome. Please stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.